Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. In today's episode of the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show, we have Lindsey Wander. Lindsey, an educator and the owner of WorldWise Tutoring, is on a mission to equip all students with the essential tools for success in academics and life. Her unwavering belief that every student can learn drives her to employ diverse teaching techniques that cater to individual abilities and subjects. Lindsey's ultimate aim is to empower her students, nurturing them to become confident, independent, lifelong learners and competent, conscious leaders. Hi, Lindsey. Good morning. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thank you so much for taking your time out to be here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Lindsey, first question, very easy one. What do you do?
I own a tutoring company and I also have founded a tutoring nonprofit. So, what I do is basically running both of those businesses.
Right, great. Lindsey, I was just trying to go through your LinkedIn profile a few hours before this podcast was scheduled. And then, I noticed that you've always, all your experiences are in the education domain. And then, probably you didn't start off as a teacher, maybe, but then you got into it very soon. So, was that always the plan?
No, not at all. Actually, I went to college for biomedical technology. I wanted to do biomedical engineering. I wanted to be the one who built the prosthetic arms that your brain could power, kind of thing.
Wow.
So, what I studied in college was biochemistry and math. And I loved learning about those subjects. But when it came to practically applying them, I didn't enjoy it as much. So, I tried various work and study positions throughout college to find my niche of what is it that I actually wanted to do in the science and math field, not just learn about. And I fell in love with environmental studies and ecology. And so I switched my emphasis from cellular molecular to ecology in the biology realm, and then still got a degree in chemistry and still got a minor in math. But then I graduated and it said, okay, what do I do with this? What do I do with this, these biology and math degrees? So I started various internships all over the globe. Some of them were more research heavy, some were more grant and organization based, but one of them was education related. And that was it. I fell in love. I loved teaching. It was my highlight of every day. I've always loved kids. I put myself through college on babysitting money that I got from middle and high school. And so kids were always a thing for me. And looking back and talking to family and friends, I was always a teacher in some capacity. I was always helping other friends in school, teaching the kids while I was playing with them, play-based learning. But it wasn't until I had that internship, which was environmental education, that I was like, this is it for me. And I went back to school to get my teaching credential, and I was a classroom teacher. And I taught biology and math. So I still was able to use my math and science.
Great. So you started off your formal teaching career by going to a classroom teaching setup, but at some point you transitioned into starting your own entrepreneurial venture in teaching itself. So how did that transition happen? Are there any specific reasons?
Another windy road. So, as a classroom teacher, as many people know, the pay is not very high. And I actually took a pay cut and worked at a charter school. So the pay was lower, but I really loved what the charter school stood for. It was teaching in South Central Los Angeles, and I just loved that job in the school. It's called Synergy Academies, if anyone is curious. They're fantastic. But to supplement my income, I tutored on the side. And so downtown Los Angeles is actually not too far from Beverly Hills. So we're talking about a lot of the families that were able to pay for the tutoring to supplement my income. So I was tutoring to bring in some extra money and also to avoid traffic. So I can kind of stay in the area until traffic died down. Anyone who's from Southern California knows. But then when I decided to leave California and move to Chicago, I didn't find a school that resonated with my values as much. I am very much a student centered teacher. I really like to teach the soft skills to students. I'd like to really focus on underlying skills with them. So my approach is quite unconventional, but I get really big results. And what I found was a lot of schools in Chicago were a little bit too test focused as we're talking about test prep, but they were more about the school testing, and it was like giving kids questions and they thought that was the way that they were going to learn. And I'm much more of a content experience based kind of teacher, especially teaching biology, like you got to get your hands in there and feel it. So I decided, I've been tutoring for the past 5, 6 years on the side. What if I just tutor full time? And it blew up because it went beyond me. Within about a year, I just couldn't even keep up with the clients that were coming in because my process was so effective. So then I went through and actually formed the business and started hiring tutors and figuring out, how do I teach the teachers? How do I not just teach students, but how do I teach them the methods that I use? And now we just hit our official 8-year anniversary, because in the beginning when I started my business, I didn't really know what I was doing. So technically it's 11 and a half
Yeah.
years old. But in the beginning, I was like, I didn't know I had to file paperwork and it dissolved and all that. So I didn't know what was going on. But so I call it my 8-year anniversary. I just hit on Monday a couple days ago. And now
Congratulations.
thank you. And we're at 100 tutors now. So, and we're in 2 states
Okay.
and work with students all over the globe. So there's definitely been growth there, but it was not my intention when I first started out.
Yeah, most of the successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, where they are now, none of them intended to kind of be here wherever they are today, and that's one common thing that I've seen, if not a lot of other things. But Lindsay, yeah,
I was going to say, and I think maybe that's what makes us successful in a sense, is that I have so much life experience and so many skills that I've accumulated in different positions throughout my life, that I really understand various perspectives. I can come in as a tutor, understanding what's going on in the classroom, for example. And so I think that perhaps that's, even though it was windy, I think all of those things contributed to get me where I am today.
right, right. uh, Lindsay, one is you working with charter schools, and then kind of having your, you must build something, right, for a number of years. When you start, nothing just happens overnight. And as if that itself is not an effort, you also make a move from one place to another place. And that's pretty much like a restart, right? That's pretty much like starting
Yeah.
from scratch. Of course, you've got business expertise and all that, but building a customer base or a student base is another thing. How easy or difficult it was? Because the way you said it, it definitely sounded easy. You just, it blew up in a year. What exactly did you do?
I mean, anyone who describes me will say I'm a hustler. They don't really ever have to worry about me. I'm going to figure it out. And in that case, I hustled, meaning if I didn't know something, I learned it very quickly. Like I took the SAT. We didn't take the ACT. I was on the West Coast. And back then it was much more of a West Coast, East Coast thing. But in Chicago, it was more about the ACT. Okay, so I had to learn it. I had to learn this test. And then what I did is I took clients at a very low rate to kind of test out my skills and practice and fine tune my strategies, and also giving them perks of if they gave me a referral or wrote a recommendation or a testimonial, all of that, just trying to build myself as a brand in a sense. Expanding the subjects I can teach, but also, showing, valid proof that I was successful in teaching that. And so it was scary leaving a job with insurance, and benefits and a steady paycheck. The first year it blew up, but even the second year, I mean, it was tough. I was working 7 days a week. I was running all over the city. I don't care how far you were. If I commuted 2 hours to you, I was going to go, just because I knew it was going to get me somewhere. So it was definitely a hustle. And I think that's something that not a lot of people see when you do reach a certain level of success. They just think it looks easy. But I do want to remind people, especially, in their own paths, that it is tough in the beginning, and it's tough throughout the whole thing. The life of an entrepreneur, I mean, you go up and down. Those first few years, you take a lot of personal hits. Like, it feels bad to you when you don't do well as a business. Now I know to weather them, and I know I have my lows and my highs, and I see the patterns and I know what's happening. But in the beginning, it is tough, but you really have to be resilient. You have to be willing to put in the work to kind of take every opportunity to learn and expand with that end goal in mind, knowing that it's a temporary 1, 2, 3 year window, but it will pay off.
Right. Lindsay, you just spoke about how the first couple of years or the first 2, 3 years were kind of up and down, and you were hustling, a lot of travel, a lot of sacrifices maybe. On a personal front, how did this affect, and how did you kind of navigate the entire challenging phase of balancing personal life and this first 3 years of building?
Well, when I started doing this, I was 29. So I felt like it was a perfect age. Maybe some people think it's late, people think it was early, but it worked well for me in terms of I had experience. I had some wisdom I had accumulated, but I still had the energy. So,
Right.
I was able to kind of do all the things and still maintain a pretty active social life and stay healthy. I was able to balance it all. I don't know if I could do that now in my 40s. That would be a little more challenging because, energy level is definitely lower, but I think that's a big part of it. I also think another aspect, even though I am one of my only friends and family members that started their own business, I still have a really strong support network who's been there with me from the beginning. And even though they may not be business owners or even in the education space, they have experiences with me as a person, but also in their own lives that they were able to support me in various ways. It was actually one of my friends who's a physical therapist, completely different field, but she was the one who said, "You've outgrown yourself. It's time to hire." And when I said, "I'm worried about that, it's a service based industry. How do I know my service is still going to maintain a high quality? Now my name is attached to this." And she said, "The first one you hire is going to be the hardest. And then after that, you're going to say, 'Why didn't I do this sooner?'" And that is exactly what happened. It was hard in the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, hiring someone, but luckily I had worked for other tutoring companies. I saw what I liked and didn't like. So I took those experiences and try to make the first hires the best I could. And one of the first hire wasn't very great. That was a tough one. But the second hire ended up staying with me for about 6 years. So, and really propel the business forward. So there's some learning there, and not to take things so personally when that first didn't work out. Oh, quit and that's it. No, take it, learn from it, what didn't work, and adjust for the next one. That's something I did as a teacher. That's something I do as a scientist, just kind of experimenting, trying it out, learning and adjusting. So it wasn't completely foreign to me. And those are actually two phrases I often use with my students: to think like a scientist and to act like an entrepreneur, because I think that I learned a lot of skills in both of those fields that really helped me weather the ups and downs.
Great. Think like a scientist, act like an entrepreneur. That's the
Hmm.
catchphrase of this podcast. I'm going to remember
Hmm.
that. That combination is not very common at all. It's quite a rare
It's
combination.
not, but it's a scientist is all about testing, trying. Even if something fails, you still learned from it. It's just keep moving forward, keep progressing. Don't think you know everything. You're always learning. And then an entrepreneur is resilient, creative, self-aware, conscious. They're just leaders that are looking about how can they inspire others. So.
Great. Lindsay, I'm going to kind of, a lot of things that you spoke in the last few minutes. I'm just going to come from the, you know, kind of a structure that I have in my head. So when you started off in Chicago, right, you said the first 2, 3 years was like building phase and then you made your first hire. But was all the 3 years about you going to the student's home, or, did you also have students over to a common place?
So this was back in Skype days. And so I did have some students abroad. I put myself on some platforms at a very low rate, knowing that if I got one or two students in a region, it would expand, they would refer. So I got random pockets of students in Ukraine and Poland and France, just like these funny little pockets where I was helping them either with standardized test prep, tests that they take, which their testing system is pretty wild abroad. A lot of times they get one chance a year and that's it. So there's a lot of hype, building up to it, but also, more business or advanced English in some cases for professionals. And so that was back in the day when I had to aim the camera, Skype down at my paper and, chat in the thing and write out formulas. I mean, it wasn't easy by any means, but it definitely gave me the idea that there's something there when it comes to technology. So then I started really seeking out, where can I get a whiteboard? How can I, find software? And there really wasn't anything. There was a platform called Twidla. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
Nope.
Twidla was really great. It just didn't have the camera and the microphone component. So we would have to have that on the side with Skype. So I would do a combo of the two. But
Mm,
Twidla had a whiteboard where they could write and I could screen share and so forth, which was something I didn't really get with Skype. And then Zoom came out. And so I've been using Zoom since like 2014, 2015. And that proved helpful not just for students who were out of my region, but honestly, there were cases where, so I was living in Chicago. Winters are brutal. There's times you can't travel in the winter. Let's get on Skype. The student is sick. Let's get on Skype. So it ended up working out. Some of my students who had pretty severe ADHD, something about Skype. I'm sorry, Zoom. I didn't mean to say Skype those times. Zoom. Something about Zoom and having their entire thing in a screen really worked for them. So even
right.
students that were perfectly capable of meeting in person with me preferred working online. And so, and then you could record it, and there's a whole bunch of, extra added perks there. So when COVID happened, it wasn't that hard for us because I had a whole process set up for my tutors to use Zoom, when people didn't even really know what that was. Now it's a verb, let's Zoom later. It's a whole big thing. But back then, people were not even knowing what Zoom was.
Right. Great. So, I'm assuming since you started online tutoring so early, unlike a lot of others, who only had to kind of, adapt to it in 2020 when the virus hit. So, I'm assuming you didn't have a classroom set up at all for your tutoring company, did you?
So that was another one of my business designs in noticing what I saw in working for other tutoring companies, that a lot of the families I worked with would prefer the ease of having the tutor come to their home rather than needing to bring their students somewhere.
Mm,
Furthermore, I felt like my relationship with the student was improved when I was able to actually get to know their family and see their home environment. So I preferred going into the home, and then you become a part of the family in a sense. You're eating meals with them. They give you gifts for the holidays. I mean, it's a whole, the dog runs to the door and brings you, a surprise that they found. So I feel like, again, coming at it student centered, I'm very relationship first with my students. And
right.
that I think facilitated that aspect of it. So my business model has always been to either go to the student's home or somewhere near to them, which proved very helpful in the pandemic because I never had a facility on purpose. That was never a point of mine. So we were purely going to homes or working online. Obviously, when the pandemic hit, we went completely online for a while. But within about 5 months, we were back to offering in person with precautions in place, and we never had any transmission because everybody was doing what they were supposed to do, and it was all, really great in that regard. I sought out an attorney, and I made sure there was a client agreements, waiver forms and all kinds of stuff, and just made sure all my bases were covered as a business owner. But it ended up being not even a problem at all. And so, yeah, it was easy for us. It was easy for us to go back to the homes and then to, be online for those who aren't comfortable with being in person.
That's great. And especially if you want to do online, I think it works in your favor to start the first few classes in their place, because and then the transition to online becomes a lot more easier when compared to starting entirely online. So
Yeah, and
at
we have
this,
families who ask for that. That is exactly what some do say. They want to get to know you first and then switch
oh
to
right,
online. Yeah.
So at this point, what's the percentage split if you have to say that you tutor students in home versus online, Lindsay?
Probably 50-50, honestly. So
Right.
a lot of our older students, high school and college and some middle, prefer online, especially because a lot of our students who started with us in middle or high school are now in college out of state and they want to have that continuous support. I would say, though, it's the younger, the elementary. I mean, we get 1 and 2 year olds for tutoring now because of pandemic. I mean, the pandemic rocked our world for sure.
Yeah.
I've always said all ages, and I really got put to the test during the pandemic. So, had to hire a lot of people, but definitely the younger students, it tends to be better for them to be in person. And we also work with a lot of students with learning difficulties. And depending on their learning difficulty, that, for themselves and how it affects them, some might prefer in person, even if they're older.
Right. Lindsay, you said, the experience that you gained from working for other academies helped you to kind of streamline your methods and processes. What are some of the things that you carried forward from your previous academies, and what are some of the things that you had to, leave back and then, improvise?
One of the things that I didn't enjoy about some of the other companies was the one size fits all approach. I feel like
Right.
students who are seeking out outside support, outside of the classroom, they're not looking for that, package thing. And I end up getting a lot of families that tried that with other companies and said it didn't work for them. So I've always been more about that personalized approach. Let's figure out where you're struggling and help you build a personalized toolkit that you can utilize for yourself. What works for one student might not work for you, and that's fine. So I think that that was one thing I really was adamant about from the very beginning. I also noticed that other companies maybe had one tutor for math or one tutor for English, and the families were juggling all these different tutors for different subjects. And I wanted to also simplify that process for them. Not only were we coming to their home or meeting where it's convenient for them, but we're giving them one tutor who can do everything. And so that helps with that relationship building, but also just makes it much more consistent because it's not just all these different teaching styles and, juggling all these different things and approaches. It's one tutor who's really able to be more of a mentor or a coach for the student, assisting them with anything they need help with. So we often get families that maybe are prepping for the ACT, the students, but they also have a biology class or they have an engineering class and they're wanting someone who can assist with that. And so I have a flat rate for the hour, no matter what we're helping with. It's more based on grade level and location and so forth. And so that way the tutor has the flexibility in the student to say, we have a test, in biology class in 2 days. We're going to focus most of the session on that. The ACT is in 2 weeks. Okay, we'll focus most of this session on that. And so they're able to flex based off of the student needs. And then I would say the last thing is, again, I just focus a lot on the soft skills. Students who are seeking out tutoring, it's not because they're not capable. They are bright, very capable. There's something else happening. Maybe they lack organization skills. Maybe they struggle with planning and prioritizing. Maybe if it's a test prep, they struggle with identifying nuances and questions. It's not because they can't do it. It's that they're lacking maybe some of the finer tuned soft skills that I personally think is more valuable in the grand scheme of things to learn than just memorizing formulas and tricks and stuff like that. And so teaching them how to get organized, teaching them how to prioritize, teaching them how to notice nuances are things that then start trickling into other classes. They start spreading into their college experience, their professional experience. I often get students who are with me since I've been around for so long who come back as tutors. These are kids who hated school and now have carried that all the way through college and their professional life, that they say, this works. I want to go teach it to other students now because I love to learn now. It's enjoyable to me. And so I've always come at it from more of a, what's causing the disconnect here rather than just going straight into the disconnect. Like, let's kind of also address the underlying issues. And for that reason, our students usually, stay with us for 2, 3, 4 months. And then they say, actually, I kind of want to try this on my own. Yes, good, bye. Which is another business model that's different. A lot of other businesses try to retain them and make them rely on them and depend on them. I want to empower them, and then they leave and tell everybody. and then I get all the referrals coming in with no marketing. And so that helps in that regard. And it's clients you want to. It's not just somebody random. It's somebody who's been referred and they're basically like, here's my money. Where do I sign up? Kind of thing. Because they've already heard from a friend. So there's various things I've done which maybe make us more boutique style in a sense, but a lot of people are looking for that. And the success rates are extraordinary.
Awesome. Something, the 4 month thing is something, yeah, as you said, a lot of them try to retain, and but you have a different thing going on, and as long as it works for you, it seems to be working, it's great. Of
Hmm.
course it's organic, right? It's
Hmm.
ideal in a way, but
Yes.
is your business working despite that? Seems
Yeah,
like
it
it,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, we have some referral perks. If you refer a family, we give you free tutoring. The tutors get
Hmm.
bonuses based off of referrals from their services, so that
Right.
incentivizes them. In the end, even those little perks here and there still pay off because someone stays with us and then brings in their other children and they come back multiple years and so forth. So it pays off in the end. So it does work. I wouldn't say we're a massive business that's ready to be franchised, but that's not my model anyway. As you know, I didn't come at this wanting to be a business owner. I wanted to work with children and teach. And so that's still always going to be in the forefront of my values is how can I give the most, the best service possible to these families, not so much about the quantity. It's more about the quality.
Right. Lindsay, you also mentioned about simplifying it by not having different tutors for different subjects. While it may work for kids that are of younger age, as you go higher up, have you had objections from parents? Because that's probably one of the ways parents also judge you, right? Oh, is this tutor gonna teach everything? Then is he not an expert in one thing? That sort of thing. Did you have that objection? If you did, how did you kind of handle that?
Don't, because I myself am an expert in many different subjects through life experience. I've personally found the most objections I get is if they see that they're not a classroom teacher, they're more of a professional in that field. And so they get nervous, but they're not an educator. Honestly, as a former classroom teacher, just because you have a teaching credential or you're a classroom teacher doesn't mean you're a good teacher. In fact, I often feel like it's more of the professionals with that real life experience that tend to be the better, educators and are able to teach multiple subjects in a way that intertwines those soft skills because they see the bigger picture outside the scope of let's just get to standards and test scores kind of thing.
Right.
So sometimes I'll get a little kickback on that, but then once I explain it to them, give it a try, they usually are like, "Oh, you're right." Kind of thing. Another part is I match the tutor with the student. It's one of my superpowers. I'm really good at knowing which tutors go really well with which students. And so I think if I just threw 100 tutors at a family and said, okay, you pick, it might be a little bit different and they may get a little lost in there. But when I present to them and I tell them, I think this is going to be a good tutor for you, I don't ever have them say we want a different tutor. There maybe once in a blue moon because of a personality fit. But it usually because I'm giving it that that personal hand picked touch. Um, they don't really question it that much.
Right. It's interesting that you said, you're an expert at matching the right tutor with the right student, or, it works for them. So how did you come about, at to do this? And, if you can share a little bit about that, I think that'd
Yeah.
be interesting.
As I'm growing, that's one of the things, I'm looking at a lot of things I do and thinking, what can I hand off? What can I delegate, so I could focus more on these other things. And this is one of the ones that I don't know how to explain it. It's a feeling a lot of times. I'm very intellectual, but I also follow my gut on a lot of things. And a lot of it is a gut feeling. I do in the
Right.
end, I will present to the families two or three tutors to choose from and I'll rank them in order. So I'll put the one I really think is the best fit as one, and then the other ones as two and three. But yeah, it's a little more of just a feeling of knowing the tutor, knowing what the references have said, knowing what other clients have said, understanding what the parent is saying are the issues, using my past experience of students who have had similar concerns, and just kind of putting them together.
Right. Great, Lindsay. That was I totally get it when you say, you can't really put it down in, black and white as to how you end up matching tutors with the students, where they both like each other or they sync. But yeah, I get that when you say it's your gut instinct. Lindsay, let's go back to your hiring experience, right? You said your first hire wasn't great, but the second one stayed with you for like 6 years. What were your learnings from your first hire? What did you learn from that experience?
I was just talking about this morning, but when someone's difficult from day one, they're going to be difficult day two, three, four, five, six, seven. Okay. So don't force it, don't push it. I even got someone today who applied for a job and was already being difficult in the very first message. There's no point in me pursuing that because it's going to be a challenge the entire way through. And I feel the same way about clients too. If a client is challenging from the very beginning, I'm not going to be like, well, it's worth it for the money, because you don't know what kind of path they're about to take you down. So, my lesson learned in that is don't force it. If something doesn't feel right and it's too challenging right from the beginning, I think that's a rule for most things in life, honestly. We could talk about relationships and so forth. But, there's a difference between quitting and just giving up. And in those cases, I kind of just quit. Like that person is not a good fit for me. I'm not giving up because it's hard necessarily. I'm just recognizing that this isn't something that's a good fit.
Wow, I wish, we could have a whole another podcast on this particular
Seriously.
topic that you
Yeah.
spoke about.
Seriously.
But I'm just going to get
But
back to, yeah, yeah, please.
but yeah, the key is don't force it. Don't It's not worth the money to force it. May cost you more money in the end if you do.
Yeah, great. But I'm
Mhm.
going to, come back to this question from a company and a teacher point of view, is, where you're the
Yeah.
company and, you're trying to hire a teacher. You said
Yeah.
difficult from day one. Could you, dive into it a little bit?
Explain
Like
that.
what are the traits that you would classify as difficult?
So I'm all about advocacy. I'm all about standing up for yourself. But there is also a point where I think unless you have been a business owner, you may not fully understand why some things are being done the way they are. I had a tutor who applied for a job and was upset that I wanted to contact his references. Said that that was a terrible way to assess if someone is a quality employee. It wasn't my only way to assess them, but it is one of my ways of assessing. And the parents expect that I have not just background check them, but also checked prior positions. And so he gave me a lot of attitude, and I just said, this isn't a good fit. This is my procedure. This is my company. There is a reason for it. There's a lot tied to it in my advertising, my marketing, my contracts. It's not just something I willy nilly am convicted, to do because I want to. So anybody who questions the process too much in a way that's combative lets me know that they're going to continue to be combative the whole way through. And while I'm happy to explain the reasoning behind things, that's not the approach that was given to me. It wasn't a may I ask why, kind of thing. It was a this is stupid. Why do you do that? Okay, go somewhere else. I'm often surprised by people who apply for jobs and come at me with that kind of energy when they're coming to me looking for a job.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to a lot of things that are happening in society, and maybe it's generational. I don't know. And it's not that I expect people to just be submissive and compliant. I like when they, stand up for themselves, but there's a way to do it that's respectful. And that's also what I teach my students. Advocate for yourself, share your point of view, tell someone I respectfully disagree. But there's a way to do that without being combative and difficult, honestly, because people don't want to be around you or interact with you or hire you in this situation if you're going to make it too difficult from them from day one.
Well, I definitely didn't imagine this to be that difficult that you said, because you, in that case, you were pretty graceful, the way you put it. Some people are difficult. But okay,
Mhm.
now, let me ask you. You said, there are two different things. One is being difficult from the start, and then, another is not quitting
Yeah.
on each other. Can you give an example, where you kind of stuck to a teacher, you had your differences, but you worked out? What are those situations like?
Yeah. Educators are all very different. And I often find that sometimes they could be a little quirky, especially if they're teaching a subject that might be a little more left brain or right brain. They might just have kind of their facets that are a little interesting, which might throw me off, but isn't necessarily difficult or disrespectful. It might just be, for instance, they might send me a message that is 6 paragraphs long and it could have been summarized in 2 sentences,
Right, right.
And so I just, while that, takes up some of my time, I also understand that's maybe just how they communicate and I'm willing to flex a little bit to them. They also are really great communicators with the clients in that case, and so I don't want to shut that down. So I think, a big part of it is just understanding what's something that I can flex on and I'm willing to be tolerant of, and what's something that actually could cause harm to my business and to our students. And so knowing the difference of what's an inconvenience and what's a challenge is kind of key. If it's an inconvenience, okay, fine. But if it's actually going to cause problems, it's not worth it.
Wow, this is like great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing this with a couple of examples. And Lindsay, you were a person that was encouraged by your physical therapy friend to kind of make your first hire. At which point you were so suspectful, but today you're saying that you have 100 tutors. So how did that evolution happen from one being suspectful to 1 to 10 to 100? Can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah. So 2015 is when I made the first hire. And that year I hired, I think, three. Then I slowly brought in more and more based off of the clients. I didn't want to have, I always want to have a little more tutors than clients because my client base is growing. So always kind of front loading, but not so many that they're just sitting and frustrated because they're not getting any students. By the time the pandemic started, I had 40 tutors. So here we are 3.5 years later, I'm at 100. So that kind of tells you what happened there.
Yeah.
I saw the pandemic coming. Also, remember, I'm a biochemist. And so when people are saying schools are closed for 2 weeks, I was like, no. And I also knew that people were going to have their kids home and we're going to start seeing what was really going on in the classroom and go, I'm not happy with this. I also started noticing they were trying to take what was happening in the classroom and just throwing it on a computer. And I was a little frustrated with that because, again, ed tech, there's so much incredible education technology out there that uses AI, that tracks math. I mean, incredible. And I thought at first, yes, we're going to finally be using this stuff. And then they just went, nope, let's just put a camera here. So once I started seeing that, I knew, okay, this is the time for my company to shine. And I just started hiring. Also, at the same time, people were being laid off from work. They had a lot of extra time. They were looking for extra income. So I was getting really high quality people applying, doctors, principals. I mean, really, really high quality. So I snagged them, grabbed as many of the really high quality people as I could, got them trained. I also did a lot of rebranding of the company. I've always talked about underlying learning and life skills, but now people knew the names of these things. They knew metacognition, they knew executive functions, they knew interpersonal skills, they knew what those words meant. And so I also started really putting that outward in my recruiting of tutors, but also for clients, making sure I was bringing people in for that specific regard, and then doing more deliberate trainings for my tutors in those subjects because they were seeing the value in that and their professional career and knowing why that was important, where before it was very fluffy and foo-foo, and now people are like, no, these are just as important as hard skills. And I saw all that coming. And so even though my business had been climbing a little bit, every year, I thought, this is it. Everybody leave me alone. I am sitting in my house for the next year. And this is when my business is going to grow. And so I just put everything into it because I knew, this was my industry's time to shine. I even had a conversation this morning. People are talking about there's another round of COVID coming.
Oh,
Something
wow.
is coming. And I just said, okay, I kind of got to keep my ear out for that stuff and buckle down and prepare and ask my clients what are they needing and prepare to make sure I have that stuff ready for them. So COVID definitely exponentially made us grow, but in a way that I was waiting for. I was waiting for something like that to happen. And once I saw the signs of it, I jumped right in.
Right. Right. Now, Lindsay, going back to the time, when you were probably, hiring one or two, and then one of your worries was you had set a certain standard and your name was associated with it. One of the problems that a lot of teacherpreneurs, who are growing face the dilemma that they are in is to hire or not. Should they continue to teach and hire others for other things, or should they kind of, scale up? And you seem to have kind of solved that problem for yourself. So how did you deal with teaching and then training the teachers? And then, at one point, you couldn't have been doing it every time a teacher joins. And so how do you handle all of that?
So in my company, everybody's an independent contractor. They're 1099s. They are not employees. So we have to be really careful calling things trainings or making them required, because then that means you're starting to treat them like an employee.
Okay.
But I also wanted to incentivize them to acquire this training. And so what I started doing was providing the training for free, but making it very meaningful for them with very specific tips and resources that I knew that they could apply. So it wasn't 8 hours long. It was an hour of intense, let me give it to you, giving them things afterwards that they could utilize and then adding it to their bio as an extra perk. Because what I was seeing as I was moving from a one person business to a multi person business is that the families had heard about me and they wanted me. But when I can tell the family, well, I'm not available, but I trained this tutor in my methods, they tended to pick those tutors. And so I started adding that I trained them into their bios, which made them more likely to get selected by the families. Furthermore, the feedback I've gotten from the tutors is that the trainings are so valuable that even those who have been educators for 20, 30 years have never received anything like that. And that it not only helps them with our clients, but any of their own things. Like maybe they have their own side students, because I don't have a non compete in my contract. That was one thing I didn't like about other tutoring companies. And so I
Right.
tell them, work for whoever you want, just don't take my clients. So the fact that they can take some of the strategies I've shown them and then build their client base outside of me is helpful. Classroom teachers start to implement it in their classroom. There's all these things where I take in this big, huge concepts, metacognition, and I just say, here's how you do it. And they're like, that's it? And I'm like, yeah, it's not that hard. It sounds so intense, but it's super easy to do if someone just breaks it down for you. So, bottom line is making it meaningful, incentivizing them because it'll bring them in more money, and then giving them the freedom to utilize it outside of our students is another way to bring them on board with it. And so now I just offer them regularly. We have college applications are a big thing this time of year. So I just did a college app training, or I call them a webinar, where they came in and they can sign up if they want to, but they don't have to. And if they
Right.
do, they get all these incentives and perks to go with it.
Awesome. Lindsay, one is transitioning from being a independent teacher and then, hiring a team. And then, as your tutors grow, it's kind of, becoming a large organization. And then, you might have had, I don't know. So did you hire more people for other roles? Do you have other people for other roles?
Yeah.
So can you walk us through that expansion of your company, in different things,
Yeah.
more than just teachers?
Funny. The same person who told me to hire my first tutor also told me I need an assistant. So in 2020, she
Right.
said, "You need an assistant. This is ridiculous. You can't be doing everything." And I'm great at delegating. That's how I run my classroom too. It's very student led. So I'm happy to hand things off. I think that's the best way to learn, is to do it. So I'm a great delegator, which is weird because I'm a type A personality, but I'm like, here, 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 to do it. So she actually brought in my first assistant, which was her kid's nanny, looking for a job during the year when schools were closed because she's waiting to go to law school. And she's a family friend. And so I was like, okay, it's not just some random person because I don't know what I'm doing. And then with that, we built a manual, we built processes, we built things that I could hand over and things I needed to keep. And she stayed with me for a year before she had to go back to law school. And then from there, I realized, yeah, this is what I need. I need an assistant. And so I have an assistant now who's been with me for a year. Carrie, you're phenomenal. She's actually sitting by the pool visiting her son right now, working from her phone and her laptop. So this works out for her because it's a remote job and lets her go wherever she wants. But she basically helps me run this business from everything. I mean, there's things we switched to a new software in May. I don't even know the software because she handles it completely. And so she's very valuable to me so that I can focus on more of the client acquisition, more like things like this, more of the tutor training, the things that are really helping bring me forward. She handles the, onboarding of the students, the onboarding of the tutors. I still am the one hiring the tutors, but in terms of getting them in the system, getting their bios set up, the behind the scenes stuff that's really important, but isn't just the best use of my time. And it's where she flourishes. One of the hard parts in doing that is the guilt of being like, I'm giving them just stuff to do. But then I'm realizing, because it's stuff I could do, but I don't, like, can you check this balance? Can you message this parent? Can you contact this person? But the thing is, and I had someone explain it to me, there are people who have skills that are different than yours and
Yeah.
they have strengths, and you're actually giving them something that's a strength of theirs. Her strength is organization, following steps, following through. She's so good at that, where it's harder for me because I'm being pulled in many directions, especially now having started a nonprofit. I couldn't have started the nonprofit if I didn't have a strong assistant like her. So really understanding it's not like a giving them just stuff to do. It's more like, this is the stuff she likes to do, so I can focus on the stuff I like to do. And we work collaboratively in that way.
Great. So, Lindsay, do you tutor at all now?
I don't. And one of the things I don't like. Um, I like always having at least one or two students, mainly because that's what I love. I do love teaching the teachers. Don't get me wrong. That's one of my favorite parts, but I also think it keeps me fresh. It keeps me up to date on strategies and things that are going on. The reason why I'm not with students is because the nonprofit is about to hit 3 years. And I told myself I needed to dedicate, as knowing how businesses go. The first 3 years, I'm hands-on. I need to work exclusively. It's like 50 hours a week on the nonprofit. I am putting in a lot of effort into it to get it to a place that it can be handed off and other people can take it over. So in a couple months, I'm going to come back to my business, and then I probably will end up taking one or two students, because I think that it not just keeps me fresh, but I think it makes me a better leader, because there's a classic case when you're a classroom teacher of a principal or assistant principal or administrator not understanding what's going
Yeah.
on in the classroom because they're so far removed. I don't ever want to get to that point where I feel completely disconnected from what they're experiencing. I think, if I come at them as a fellow educator, it makes it a lot easier for me to relate to them and build that, relationship with them as a leader.
Right. I kind of didn't expect the expression, the reaction with which you said you don't teach anymore, because I was expecting otherwise. But I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So it may have been really great for you, the first 3 months when you didn't have to teach, you just had to delegate work and stuff like that. But did you face any fears at some point? Oh, you know what if I'm losing that entire rhythm of teaching, or if I'm kind of developing a gap between, because there are maybe some upgrades in the curriculum, or stuff like that. Do you have any such fears or insecurities while you did not teach for a long time?
Not in terms of the curriculum, because I always come at it from perhaps a different angle than most tutoring companies do. Um, I want to be an extension of support for the schools. So our tutors and me, we flex to what the school is doing. What I don't want is for the student to come to us and be taught in a totally different way than what they're obtaining in school. And now there's a disconnect, or worst case scenario, I'm not going to pay attention in class because my tutor will show me later. That's not helpful for anybody. And as a classroom teacher, I want to help them to be better students. So I've always flexed with what's coming to me. Okay, this is how the teacher is teaching it. Okay, let me try to explain what the teacher is trying to explain, and then give you additional resources to help, because that's not the only way to learn it. There's multiple ways to get from point A to point B, and it's usually that process is where the student has trouble, and maybe they find a different way, and that's fine, but still helping them to understand what the teacher is trying to say. So, not in that regard. Now, in terms of test prep, yes, because the test industry has changed dramatically over the past 3 years. I mean, the SAT is completely digital now, starting in a few months. What? I mean, wow. All my strategies are out the window, like everything
Yeah.
I had, and so that's hard, trying to stay up to date in that regard and make sure that I'm providing the support my tutors need to flex with those changes. So my answer to that is I keep learning. So, I attended a webinar yesterday about the new digital SAT, and I was learning about the formatting and rapidly taking notes and adjusting my own presentation for our tutors. But subject content stuff, nah, that's not a problem. The tests, that is wild. What's been going on in that industry?
Right. Great. Lindsay, now when it comes to test prep, right, there's SAT and ACT. Most of them say this, it's not very different from each other. So, on what basis do you think a student chooses, either SAT or ACT, or has there been a situation, when you had to recommend either of them for some of your students?
I actually have a little quiz that I have students take, which has about 10 questions off of trends I've noticed. For instance, and not, the digital SAT is throwing me for a loop a little bit here, but we often describe the ACT as an achievement test. It's really assessing your knowledge of specific subjects, where the SAT is more of an aptitude assessment, your ability to solve problems, perhaps without that prior knowledge. It's not just formulas, it's, can you critically think? And so I sometimes find that that correlates with similar school subjects. So algebra tends to be more straightforward and black and white, where geometry might be a little more abstract. Biology could be more straightforward. Physics might be a little more abstract. And so I often like to ask the students, what do you prefer, biology or physics? Where do you excel? Where do you prefer, biology or algebra, chemistry, or geometry? Sorry. And so I can kind of gear it in that regard. Also, there's certain parts of the exams, like the SAT, even the digital one, the vocab is challenging. Not that they have a vocab section anymore, but the vocabulary in the reading passages, in the English section, it's tough words. So I often want to know, where's the student's reading level? Do they read for fun? What type of reading do they do? Because I find that students who are better readers tend to do better on the SAT. So there's certain little caveats I've just noticed, but with all that being said, I've been surprised. If I have the time, I like a student to take a diagnostic of both, and I compare the percentiles side by side, and I make a recommendation. And there's been some that have surprised me. I thought for sure you were an ACT kid, and they end up being an SAT kid. So there are some outliers there, obviously. Um, another caveat with the SAT, half of it is math. It's 50% math, where the ACT, it's only 25%. So there's little things there that it's like, well, where are their strengths? And I make recommendations. If I have the time, though, the best way is to have them take a diagnostic of both and compare them side by side. And it's not a waste of time if they take an ACT and an SAT, because even though the way the questions are delivered is different, the content is still the same. So it's still highlighting for me as the educator, what is the content that we need to go in on in the very beginning? The math score may have been lower on the SAT than the ACT, but I do see a commonality of they're struggling with fractions. Okay, we need to hit fractions pretty hard from the beginning, because fractions are interspersed throughout a lot of the problems. So it still gives us valuable information and actual questions to actually review with the student, in the very beginning.
Great. Lindsay, you said, it's 50-50 when it comes to in-home tutoring and online tutoring, right? And when it comes to online tutoring, there's the softwares that play a big role in ensuring that the whole process is smooth. And between the tutor and the student, what are the most important tools for you as a business,
In what regard?
from a software point of view? Interacting,
I
teaching, the
see.
whole operation
Hmm.
stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to shout out Indeed. I find great tutors on Indeed. So I love that they allow me to post jobs for free. I love their assessment software. I love their templates. I mean, it's just super user friendly and really easy to use. Obviously, I love Zoom. I've loved Zoom for 8 years now, and it's improved tremendously over the past few years now that everyone's on there. But I love the ability to have everything in one platform. I love that we can record. I love the whiteboard. I love the screen sharing, and I can write on the screen. All of this stuff is really valuable for tutoring because students learn in a multitude of ways. So that hits on the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, like we're getting everything, which helps just dig it deeper into their brain. I've used a platform called Tutor Panel for about 8 years now, and they shut down in May. So we switched to a new software called TeachWorks, which was painful to switch.
Right.
But in hindsight, the software is so much smarter. It has a lot of things that actually save us time so that I can give other things to my assistant to do, that helps take more off my plate. And so it's a wonderful software where it keeps track of the lesson notes, the scheduling, the balances, the invoices, everything's in one place. And that makes it simpler when it comes to payroll, asking families to pay, their balances, whatever it is. It just makes that whole process super fast. So I don't get bogged down with a lot of the tracking in that regard. Plus, the families like it because they get an account, the tutors get an account, they could check the lesson notes, and everybody, we don't have like no shows, we don't have what was covered, we don't have, I don't know what the homework was. It's just all kind of tracked in one place. Those are probably my three superheroes. In terms of client acquisition, Facebook is key for me. I get a lot of clients off, especially Facebook groups, because people are really asking for help there. But a lot of the other things, Nextdoor, Yelp, waste of time, waste of money. And Facebook ads, I think, are a waste of time, waste of money. I tried that too, but Facebook groups have been really helpful as well.
Great. And despite all the tech, do you think there are still a lot of things that aren't solved yet for you from a tech point of view?
100%. There's probably more things that can be automated. So, I'm pretty savvy when it comes to integrations and automations and trying to cut out a lot of the manually having to do things. But there's some things that I'm surprised there's not an automation for. And I tell the software developers, you need an automation for this. This is important to us. Um, I also think that there's some, I hesitate to do it because I think the human component in my job, the personalized touch in my business is what really helps me stand apart. But I do think there's potential to streamline some of the onboarding process with the clients and the tutors, but still have the personal touch involved. And so I'm keeping my eye out for that. Right now, I'm happy with TeachWorks, for example, and what my process is. But it's more hands-on than I think it needs to be. I don't want a platform where they just kind of match each other. I don't like that. I still want to have that personal experience of getting to know the tutors and the clients. But if there's another way to simplify that process, but still make it personalized, I'm open for that. And then the other thing is, there's so much great educational software out there, like I mentioned before, that uses AI and individualizes the instruction for the student. What I've noticed though is that you really only have two choices. You're either registering as a family with a couple children or a school. And the price difference between them is thousands and thousands of dollars. I feel like a lot of the software companies need an in between for people like me, where we have a small business and I want several tutors and students to log in. But I don't need the package for an entire school necessarily. So there's a lot of those resources I just don't have access to right now that I would like to have access to.
Right, right. Going back to automation, if there's one that you really needed right now, which one is that?
I would like things to talk to each other better. So when someone fills out a form on my website, I would like it to automatically load into my CRM to give me things in my email to fill out, certain forms that can then help us pull out the important information to match them to a tutor. Right now, there's just a lot of manual in there. Um, it does sometimes sync up to my CRM, for example, but they're not always. There's sometimes hiccups in the way things are formatted. And then the CRM goes,
Mm,
I don't know about this phone number. It has parentheses, not dashes. And there's just certain things I think kinks still need to be worked out in how things talk to each other. And so when
right.
someone does one thing, it kind of puts it everywhere, if that makes sense.
But I totally feel you when you say you're surprised because, we are talking about advanced stuff like AI, it's doing so much. But, when it comes to simple things like this, you do seem to wonder what's really going on. I mean, aren't someone listening to these problems? Got it.
Yeah, I mean, Zapier, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You might know better than I do, but
Yeah.
Zapier is great because it kind of plays the middleman between a lot
Yeah.
of the automations. But even then, things are sometimes lost. So I'm not a Apple user because I feel like it doesn't play well with other devices. I really love my Droid. I love Samsung. I have a Dell laptop, and I feel like I like that I can move between devices very
Yeah.
seamlessly. It's something I'm also looking for when it comes to my software is that they communicate well with each other instead of being I only work with this. I want to be able to have separate software that talks to each other.
Right. Got it, Lindsay. Uh, Lindsay, I think all of the conversational style of questions I'm done with for now.
Okay.
We've got about another 30 minutes or maybe less than
Okay.
that left. So I'd like to use this time to, shoot some kind of a rapid fire questions,
Sure.
where you don't have to like really deep dive, but, just be objective. These are going to be used specifically for promotional content. We're going to like make
Okay.
reels out of these videos. And that's our intention behind doing these.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is let's just take 2 minutes where I'm just going to think out loud. And from the conversation that we've had, I'll tell you what are the questions that I have in my mind that I think will be unique and interesting.
Okay.
Of course, there are some standard questions that I'll email you as well that I'll ask you.
Mhm.
And if you also want to gather your thoughts. For example, a couple of questions that I have in my mind right now is definitely top three automations that you'd like. That's one question. And you said, you explained in depth about the three tools that you use, but if you can just name them, okay, like Zoom, and then I think you said what Teachworks, and then another tool. So if you can just say that
I have another one ready. Uh-huh.
as a listicle, that's one thing that I thought about. And oh yeah, this one. So what are the three problems that your students face, who are like already bright enough? Or maybe I need to rephrase this question like this. Apart from the knowledge or the tutoring that the tutor is expected, what are the other things that really add value to a student's journey? You said about a student may be weak in organization, or identify nuances in questions. They are like intelligent. So this is one thing that I thought I could ask you. You could make it a listicle, you could make it as long as you want.
Yeah, I
And
have an answer for that.
okay, great. And you spoke about metacognition and
Uh-huh.
some words like that, right? I want to like put in a question to address those things. Can you help me with a question that'll
Yeah, I
get those
feel like
answers?
I can address that in the previous question you just asked. So when you're saying like the three
Oh, right.
things that would help,
Right.
I think it is metacognition, executive functions. So I can go into detail about those.
Okay, great.
So I think that question is phrased great.
Okay, great. And I have some other questions, but I think we can get started
Okay.
before I miss these questions. So I'm just gonna
Okay.
every between every question you'll see me take a pause because I'm adding a marker here so that it becomes easier for the editing.
Yeah.
So here's my first question. Lindsay, what are the top three automations that you'd like for your business to happen right now? Or we can
So
we can come back to it later if
yeah,
you
I
want.
might have to come back to that one because I'm still
Sure, no
thinking of
problem. No
that
problem.
one.
Yeah, no stress. My
Sorry.
second one. No problem. Lindsay, what are your top three tools that help your business, stay on course?
So the first tool that really helps me is Google Suite. I have a business account with Google Suite, which gives me Google Voice so that when I communicate with parents or students or tutors, it goes to an app that my assistant and I both log into, and we can see what's happening together. And she responds or I respond, but we both are seeing it all together. It also gives me, a lot of room to store files for my tutors and students, full practice tests, for example, or books that they can reference. So it's a place where they have resources to go to. And I really love their sheets and their docs because they're living documents, they're living sheets where edits are made and people can see them right away. So I love the Google Sheets for, tracking test scores, for example, and seeing the student's progress. And then the parents can see, and the student can see, and the tutor can see it, and everybody's seeing it live and getting change. I also love Zoom. I've loved Zoom since before Zoom was popular, though. So I'm going to say that Zoom is just so powerful as an educator because it has multiple ways of being able to deliver information, but all in one location, which is really key to simplify the learning process, but also diversify it for our students. So that's been really powerful for us, not just during the pandemic, but before and beyond it. And I love our new software that we use. We recently switched from Tutor Panel to TeachWorks. TeachWorks, as a tutoring business, has simplified my entire process of scheduling, getting clients in communication with tutors, invoicing, lesson notes. Everything is in one place. Even things like, let's say a tutor is working with a family and they have an emergency and have to leave for a month out of the country, I can pull all the lesson notes from the system and give it to a substitute tutor who then can leave very detailed notes that I can give back to the tutor when they come back, which is just such a nice, as an educator having to do lesson plans and all of that. It's just a nice way to be able to smoothly and seamlessly transition between tutors. And that's just one example of why I love that software. And it's extremely affordable. I think we pay like $30 a month for it. For the amount of time it saves me, it's completely worth it.
Awesome. Here's my next one. I have a question here, but I'm gonna ask you in two different ways.
Okay.
So the first way is this: apart from the normal tutoring skills the tutor is expected to have, what are the other skills that you think a tutor must possess? That's one way of asking. Or another way of asking is, why should a bright student, who's already very good at what he or she does, still go for tutoring?
Yeah, I think those are probably two separate. So I can address the tutor first, the tutor question. Um, a love of learning is key. So the fact that they're willing to learn new strategies or new methodologies shows their passion for information and growth. And I think that not only does that help them to acquire new information that can assist them in their tutoring, but it helps them in being a better mentor for their students in the fact that they are excited to learn and grow alongside their students. Because honestly, we learn a lot from our students too. They teach me a lot, and so being open to that. I would say, second, being an expert in multiple subjects is really key. Not necessarily just because then you can tutor multiple subjects, but you can understand the interconnectedness between subjects and how certain skills and knowledge can translate in other areas. And I think that that helps you present a more holistic lesson beyond just memorize this formula or complete this worksheet. It's really showing, that this actually connects over here, which helps to build the meaning behind the lessons and helps to encourage, engagement with the student. And then the third would be there has to be some personality there. So, the students have been at school all day with their teachers, and, unfortunately, a lot of them don't have very, meaningful relationships with their teachers in school. And so, even if the personality is a little quirky, even if it's a little kind of, their humor is kind of funny, kind of thing, but just something interesting about them that makes the sessions fun. I'm big on silly. I'm big on jokes, really having that fun aspect of the relationship. I talk a lot to my tutors about the balance between being a friend and being an authority with the students, because tutors are really in a funny position between the two, and knowing how to balance that. But a big part of that is your personality and your ability to kind of gauge where the student is and know how to kind of come at them in a way that makes it fun for them. At the end of the day, one of the things when I was a classroom teacher, for me, it wasn't so much about are they going to remember the stages of mitosis? It is more about are they going to remember they had fun learning the stages of mitosis? Because I think if we can get them to enjoy the process of learning, and a lot of kids who come to us, a lot of our students have had a pretty negative experience with learning. If we can get them to have fun learning again, I feel like that's the best gift to give them. And so bringing them a tutor that's enjoyable to be around is really, really key there. In terms of the students, skills that I think the students should have, we get students all across the board. We get students who are failing every class. We get students who are bored because they're acing every class and their behavior problems now because of that. And so it's all across the gamut. At the end of the day, I think everybody, I don't care what age you are, I don't care what grade level you have, there are certain skills that I think everybody would benefit from mastering. And I break them into, you say three, so I break them into three categories. So metacognition, which is thinking about how you think, learning how to learn. Executive functions, which are the daily skills to get you through life. Neither of those are often taught. You're just kind of left to figure them out. And then the third one, which is in a similar boat, are interpersonal skills or soft skills, which I think are both are a misnomer because they make them seem not very important, but they are. That's more of the advocacy, the leadership, the creative thinking, those things that push you beyond. And the way I explain it to my tutors is it's almost like an inner awareness, which is metacognition. Executive functions is the world directly around you. And then interpersonal skills is now the bigger, the sphere of the community or your city, whatever it is. And our goal is to get students to not just have that self awareness, but also be able to, the simplest way I can say it is not just be agents of change in their life, but also be able to affect change in the lives of others. And so taking that knowledge and actually making a difference. So with metacognition, we start with a lot of self-awareness, a lot of probably more mental health, social emotional learning, empathy, emotional intelligence. It doesn't have to be side curriculum. There's ways it can be intertwined into the lessons when you're helping a student analyze a novel in English class. There's a lot of emotional intelligence and empathy skills that can be developed there. When a student is struggling with a math problem, there's a lot of self-awareness and, regulatory behaviors that can be worked through there, stress management techniques, all of that. That's really a lot of the metacognition. Plus, we do a lot in helping students identify their learning styles. There's four main learning styles now, and helping them understand that learning styles may be different for each subject, may be different depending on what age they're in, but there's certain strategies that may help them in a learning style they may not be as strong in. Maybe they're not very strong in an auditory learning style, but they're in a classroom where the teacher just lectures. Okay, let's tap into your strength of a visual learning style and make that work for you. So really helping them understand, I don't like to call them strengths and weaknesses. I call them glows and grows. So where are they glowing and what can they grow in?
Nice.
And being able to, and the reason why I don't say strengths and weaknesses is because I was told that when I was younger and it sounds so concrete. Like, this is what you're good at. You're good at math and science. Go over here. You're not good at this. You're not creative. Stay away from that. And it's too stagnant. It's not changeable. So glows and grows are a little bit more like, yes, there's things you're really great at, but there's things that we could focus on and improve at. You're able to improve in anything. You may not be the next Tiger Woods or whatever, but you can still improve in golf. Executive functions are those skills of daily life like planning, prioritizing, time management, organization, even in a sense, growth mindset. Having that mindset of being able to grow and change and learn skills. I don't know about a lot of people, I wasn't taught how to use a planner. I wasn't taught how to take notes. I wasn't taught how to study. And so, actually teaching these skills, which are things, yeah, they figure out later on, that's fine. But if we can teach it to them when they're younger, I mean, what a tool. There's actually studies showing that students don't, their brains, the part of their brain that handles executive functions is the last part to develop. And it often isn't fully developed until their early 20s. And so giving them tools and resources to kind of bypass the wiring of the brain and kind of force it to be more advanced than it is completely possible. Um, and helping them understand that those resources and tools are fine. It doesn't mean you're bad at it. I have to write everything down or I forget it. I have to use a planner. Like, that doesn't mean I have a bad brain. I just know that tool works for me, kind of thing. And then the last is the interpersonal skills, taking all of that inner work you've done and making it have an impact. So knowing how to actively listen, knowing how to advocate for yourself in a way that's respectful. Conflict resolution. A lot of times our students are having issues in group projects or with a tutor or a teacher. Conflict resolution, leadership, critical thinking, creative problem solving. All of these things, are skills that are so important professionally, but also personally, that you're just expected to figure out through trial and error. And if we can get someone at a younger age and help them learn these skills, I feel like we're setting them up for just a lifetime of fulfillment, because they're not going to face a lot of the challenges that people face that forces them to learn the hard way, you know? Um, and so that's a big part of it too, because education propels you forward. I don't want them to get to a high level and not have the ability to reflect, not have the ability to manage time, not have the ability to be a leader. So we're giving them this powerful gift of education. Their scores are going high, their grades are high, they're going to climb, but they have to have the right mindset too. And so that's a big passion of mine, is hitting those three categories as well.
Wow, that was great to hear. Thank you for that,
You're
Lindsay.
welcome.
Because it's not often that people realize there's so much to teaching than your subjects and stuff like that, right? I mean, this is
Yeah. And they
yeah,
sound challenging, but they're so easy to intertwine into your lessons. And teachers, educators are in such a great position. They're not parents, they're not friends. They're just kind of this in between, that we're in a very powerful position to be able to teach them some really, really great stuff.
it's great the way you put it. Teachers are not parents but friends, but kind of in between, which is a very unique role, and it just cannot be invented at home and stuff like that. It has to
Mhm.
be organic, and yeah, I think great that you mentioned it, because it's a time when the role of teachers are being questioned at times and stuff like that. I think it's really nice to kind of listen to that. Lindsay, when you spoke about all of the three things, I just realized that I wanted to touch upon one topic that I missed. It's about the test anxiety that the students undergo, right? Is that a common thing with your
Oh, yeah,
students? How do you help them deal with that? Do you employ any specific methods?
absolutely. So, test anxiety, even school anxiety, just anxiety in general, is a big issue with us. And it's very debilitating for a lot of our students, and frustrating because they don't know how to overcome that. Anyone who has anxiety can tell you it's not just calm down, that you can't. And I get it. I have anxiety. So I definitely understand a lot of where the students are coming from. What we do with the students is we work on a lot of, and it ties into that metacognition, especially, but we work on a lot of the self awareness, understanding and recognizing the signs to name and kind of claim the way you're feeling, and knowing that that's okay, but not to bury that feeling. Cause I think that's where a lot of it becomes amplified, is when people are just telling you calm down or be over it, and that you can't. That's not the proper way to address it. And so working proactively to through trial and error, figure out what are some great stress management strategies for days before the test, which could tie into sleep, nutrition, and so forth. the morning of the test, or even months before, the preparation, the morning, and then even when you're in the moment with just limited resources available to you, what do you do then? So there's different points where you could be feeling that anxiety, and being able to say, well, you have a math test coming up. Let's try this, stress management technique in the math test so that we know if it works. And then having a discussion afterwards, back to that think like a scientist. What worked? What didn't work? Do you want to keep this? Do you want to try something different? So it's more of an experimentation than me saying, this works, do it. It kind of gets the students
Right.
involved in taking control of their own learning, and making that a collaboration rather than instruction in a sense. So that gets them more aware of what, back to the metacognition again, of how they're thinking, how they're feeling, and so forth. I think a lot of students may not realize like the role that nutrition plays in their anxiety, for example,
Right. Right.
or the role that the inner dialogue they have going in their head is playing, beyond. So there's a lot of stuff there. Furthermore, I think another thing is preparation. I feel like the more a student feels prepared for something and knows what to expect and in control, the less anxious they feel. And so that's our job as the tutor also, is to really prepare them for what's coming up in a way that's not adding extra stress, but making them know, okay, I know what to expect here. So then it's not so scary for them. We give them lots of full timed tests in a sitting, in a testing environment, so that by the time they go take the test, I have students say all the time to me, that was way easier than the test you give me. Good. That's what I want. I want you to go into that
Yeah.
situation, think it was easier than the situation I put you in, because I'm going to keep pushing you, pushing you, pushing you in more and more challenging situations. So that when you do get to a tough situation, you're like, I know how to handle this. I built the skills and the resilience to be able to tackle that. So there's a lot that goes into it, but very, very manageable, and is totally possible to address.
Got it. Lindsay, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. It was like, I could go on. I mean, there's so much that you've spoken, where I could deep dive, but I'd love to have a part two if you have the time sometime.
Absolutely. I could talk about this stuff all day.
Thank you.
So I
Thank you
hope
for
that
doing
there's
this.
some value for other people, whether you're, a tutoring business owner or a parent
Yeah.
or a classroom
Yeah.
teacher or student. I hope somebody gets something out of this.
A lot. A lot. That's the least I can say for now.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Lindsay. It was an absolute pleasure.